right, so for the next few thought primers, we're going to be exploring different tools that you get to put in your categorical logic toolbox and then use to evaluate the quality of categorical arguments. And in this lecture, I'm going to explore the concept behind the first tool we're going to learn how to use. So imagine this. Imagine we have this building. It's a round building, and we're standing up high in the air on a perch, and we're looking down through the roof of this building that's been removed. So the roof has been removed, and what we're looking at is the floor of this building. And in this building, every single food that is a healthy food is being housed here. Okay, so this building that we're looking down into is the place where we've stored every single healthy food that exists. So we're going to see things like apples, because apples are a healthy food. We're going to see things like beans, like kidney beans and pinto beans, because beans, all their good fiber, are a healthy food. We're going to see eggs, all that protein that our bodies really appreciate. We're going to see things like salmon. We're going to see everything that qualifies for membership in the category called healthy food. Okay. Now imagine this. We've got a totally separate building. It's even a different color. This building has blue walls. And inside this building that we're looking down into, we're going to see every single cheap food that exists. Okay. So we're going to see things like cup of noodles, right? Super cheap food. We're even going to see things like chicken, right? Because if you go to Murphy's Market and you look in the meat counter, you're going to see that oftentimes like chicken drumsticks are some of the cheapest meats that are available. So we're going to see chicken in our cheap food building. We're going to, of course, see things like Pepsi, because if you think about how cheap a Big Gulp is and how much Pepsi you can load into one of those things, we're going to see that Pepsi qualifies as a cheap food. Same thing with brown rice. You buy brown rice in bulk, and you're looking at some pretty cheap food. Now imagine this. Imagine we used our clever welding skills to figure out a way to take these two buildings and kind of mesh them together so that they kind of overlapped with one another. So that everything that's a healthy food is going to be in this area right here in area 1 or area 2. And you can see that the red walls of this building defining healthy food, they stretch kind of into the other building that houses all the cheap food. And similarly, the cheap food building kind of extends into a portion of the healthy food building. So anything that's a cheap food is going to be either in area 2 or 3. Now area 4 is outside of both of these buildings. So anything that's not either a healthy food or a cheap food is going to be out there. So things like bicycles and computers are going to be out here somewhere floating around outside of these buildings. So now the question becomes, where do I put my different types of food? So where do I put my apples, my eggs, my beans, my cup of noodles, my chicken? Well, I think the apples go over here in area 1. Because by my judgment, apples are not a particularly cheap food, particularly during certain points of the year when they're not in season. So I wouldn't want to put the apples over here in area 2, because even though area 2 does include some healthy foods, it also is going to be healthy foods that are cheap foods. And I don't regard apples as cheap foods. So I'm going to put them over here in area 1. I'm going to put beans, though, in area 2, because I've identified beans as a healthy food, but I also think beans are a cheap food. Okay, so I'm going to have to put this in the area of the buildings where they share some common space, because beans are a food item that I think possesses membership in both categories. On the other hand, my eggs and salmon, not cheap, particularly eggs, not cheap. So I'm going to have to put those in the area of my healthy food building that's separated from my cheap food building, because I don't think that eggs and salmon are members of the category called cheap food. Okay, but obviously cup of noodles totally goes in area 3, because cup of noodles are definitely a cheap food, but they're not healthy. Sorry, too much sodium. Okay, and then similarly, chicken, like beans, I'm going to put in that middle area, area 2, because I think chicken is a healthy food and it's also a cheap food. I think same thing with brown rice. It's good for us, but it's also pretty inexpensive. But obviously the Pepsi, no. Pepsi's going over here in this area of the circle of cheap food that's separated from healthy food, okay? So the principle at work here is that we can take multiple categories and we can identify what kinds of things share membership in those multiple categories and what kinds of things don't share membership in multiple categories. And that's going to be the principle operating behind the first tool for evaluating arguments that we're going to use.